All right, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you might be joining us from in the world. My name is Frank Brasky, and I'm one of the presenters today. I'll be joined with Brian Ryder, head of our innovation and strategy, and the main product owner of this product that you're about to see today. I'm going to turn on my camera myself as well. I'm Frank Brasky. I'm a digital transformation consultant based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And welcome to our adaptive automation webinar. This will be very interactive, and we want this to be engaging and educational. But we do ask for, while we're doing the short presentation up front and the demo, if you'd like to raise your hand using the little hand icon or ask a question. We'll take all the questions at the end after we've gotten through the majority of the information, and then from there we'll kind of take it as they come. So with that, I'll kick it off over to you, Brian.
Awesome. Hey everybody, how's it going? Nice to meet you. So in today's presentation, my objective is to give you as much value as I can in the shortest amount of time, and then to show you some stuff that we're working on that you can't quite find online. So some new products and things like that. Let's see, let's kick off this presentation here, throwing the slides. All right. So the topic for today is adaptive automation. Now, you might not have heard the word or the term adaptive automation before. What adaptive automation is it's, think about it like there used to be RPA, and then people have moved over into this term intelligent automation, which is combining AI and RPA. And now we're moving into this idea of adaptive automation. So as consultants, we have a rare opportunity to get front and center with customers to help them solve their problems. And what we're seeing is this very common trend in the market where companies are, the average company might have about 50 RPA bots or automations, but that is increasing dramatically. And imagine when companies start to have thousands of different bots. How are they going to control that? What we are also kind of recognizing in the market is, as you guys are aware, as we are on Microsoft Teams now, a lot of companies are moving over to Teams or chat-based communication platforms. 91% of Fortune 100 are using Teams. And this is very unique. So most of the employees are spending most of their time on Teams. And at the same time, knowledge workers on average have over 100 different apps that they traditionally have to access. Everything from, maybe Microsoft Dynamics, maybe HubSpot, and things like that. So it doesn't look like, is everybody, anybody having trouble with the sound, or is it just Mark?
Can anyone else hear?
Okay, it looks like
okay.
Perhaps Mark. All right. Yeah, just just type in the chat if you have any problems hearing. Okay, cool. So what we're seeing here is that there's two things. One is a lot of companies are bringing in more automations. The second thing is, knowledge workers have access to 100 different apps, and we're seeing a lot of companies moving to bring all of their automations actually within Microsoft Teams. Here, that little window kind of popped away. Why is that thing? Okay, so what we're seeing is companies moving over to Microsoft Teams. Here's a good example of an automation workflow that we're bringing into Teams. So this is a great use case. And this is something that you probably can't find online. This is something that we've all experienced as employees. So imagine you starting working at a new company and you might need new hardware and new equipment. And in order to get that equipment, you have to fill out an IT service desk ticket. And in order to, one second. In order to get this, to get new equipment, you have to fill out a service desk ticket. And that could take several days or if not weeks to actually process that. And instead of doing that, what we're able to do is actually bring these workflow automations right within Microsoft Teams. And that actually improves the process efficiency dramatically. So what used to take 7 days of lots of back and forth emails and manager approvals can actually happen very quickly. Another good, go ahead.
So what you're telling me is that because I'm in Teams and I know who I am in my corporate environment, I can go ahead and create an automated workflow to order equipment and get rid of 98% of the back and forth using this method.
Yes. So what used to happen is that we'd have to wait for some human to have to actually place that order on a website or something like that. Or you'd have to figure out like what is available and then get manager approval. Now you're able to actually instantly ask for what you're looking for and get that. So
it's kind of like Amazon, but from a company perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And let me see here. For some reason, the Teams thing froze on me. So here's another example of doing of manager approvals in Teams. So this is actually very effective, and this could be Teams or Slack. Teams happens to be the better approach to use for larger enterprises. That what we're seeing is that. So doing manager approvals in Teams is a lot more effective. Also things like proactive alerts, so shipping notifications, or being able to do any sort of notifications. And I'll kind of get into a little bit more detail as to what's unique about that. Another example, before I actually jump into the demo, is doing these alerts. So here's an example of a customer that we're automating purchase orders for. So this customer gets most of their revenue in through purchase orders over email. They had 10 customer service reps who had to manually enter that data into an ERP. So we're taking those purchase orders right out of email using Power Automate, processing that data, putting it into their ERP, and then sending alert to the customer service reps. So now let's get finally into the fun part of this, and I'll show you the actual demonstration of the product. So let's do that. So here we are in Teams. You guys see this? Screen frame? All right.
Yes.
So here we are in Teams, and this is a bot or a Teams app. You can access it in a few ways. You can access it here on the as like you're talking to a regular person, or you can access it as an app here on the side. So let's go ahead and kind of give you a demonstration. So these bots, traditionally a lot of bots kind of actually sucked because it was like so much conversation that it got too ridiculous. What we do is we actually design these to be easy for people who are not used to using them to get started. So you see these helper kind of conversation starters. So let's go ahead and kind of see what that is. So I can actually click through it and it'll actually give me categories for it. And then I can click on more, it'll show me different categories. Or I can actually type in specifically, like I need a mouse. So in this sense, I can add this to my cart. Essentially view the cart.
And so the pre-approved items that I'm allowed to purchase.
Yes. Yep. And so these are pre-approved items. This is a custom catalog, so it integrates directly within, for this particular instance, it interacts directly into CDW. The nice thing about deploying these automations within Teams, unlike building other intranets where you have to have people log in, the second that you're into Teams, you're authenticated using Active Directory. So people are spending most of their time on Teams anyway, so if they need something, they can quickly get access to it. So what this actually is, it looks like kind of like a shopping cart experience or shopping experience, but it's a full-blown automation that are basically helping the user build out for them. So when I go to hit checkout, here's an interesting thing, is that the system will connect to the internal systems and pull out the employee's information. So from an HR perspective, it'll pull their company address in here, or they can actually change the address. So this is something that's very common. Like even though you know the employees, like headquarters where they work, they might actually want that product shipped to their house. So here's kind of what you're seeing. This is that adaptive cart approach that I'm talking about. So instead of this being like a traditional old school chatbot that was really hard to use from that perspective, what we're doing is we're using conversational AI to easily bring up and access these mini applications or these mini automations. So I'm going to go ahead and hit confirm here to this address. And this is also a very unique user experience that hasn't actually existed before, where I'm actually able to scroll back into the conversation and get access to these applications. So this could be shopping, or For instance, you could be like, hey, I need to add something into Dynamics, and then I also need to get access to HubSpot. And throughout the course of the conversation, you have this very interesting log of being able to kind of work through these different things. So here I have like this order checkout summary, but from automation perspective, what this is I've built basically an automation script using this entire bot. And then when I go to hit submit, what it's going to do is actually kick off the automation process. So let's hit submit, and I'm going to get a manager approval here. So when I hit submit, it actually tracks the entire conversation and everything that's happening for this instance into ServiceNow. So you'll see, Kathan, it's sending that, but I can actually click on that and it'll track into ServiceNow. And then I go into Power Automate, and you'll see the actual workflow here. So this is the manager approval. And as a manager, these things used to take a long time. You'd have to go back and forth emails and things like that. I can go ahead and quickly approve that. And then it also will send an IT manager approval here. And then I click approve. So let's see, let me switch back to screen here. So after the demo, there we go. So to reiterate what we were talking about, this is something that is, I think, very clearly overlooked. This is a product from Microsoft that works very natively well with Microsoft Teams. So previously, as a developer, if I wanted to build an application and embed it into a host application, it would be very janky. I'd have to take this iframe approach, and anytime the host changed the user interface, then the actual embedded application would break and almost become unusable. With adaptive cards, you're actually embedding these mini applications or these mini automations right within Teams, and it takes and inherits the style of the actual application. So what we're seeing here is the ability to actually bring in automations or any sort of application right within conversation within Teams. So like I was mentioning previously, if you have a company that right now has maybe 50 different bots and that it's going to grow to 1,000 different bots, how are you possibly going to design a navigational system so that your employees can access those 1,000 different automation bots? It's going to be very difficult. This is where adaptive automation, adaptive cars come in. Is because using conversational AI, you can actually access these 1,000 different automations without having the trouble of employees being able to have to find them. The other nice thing is that if you deploy apps on Teams, and this is what we're seeing from our consulting experience, is all these internal applications, these intranets that companies have built, or they've, any sort of internal app, they're moving them over into Teams to have these deployed. And I'll actually show you an architecture diagram of how to do it. It's a combination of Power Apps and stuff. But once you embed these automations into Teams, you can allow employees to get a lot easier access to automations. So for the lot larger companies that are a few steps ahead on automation, this is the approach that we're seeing, is that companies are heading this direction. So from a vision perspective, imagine this. There's a very clear reason why Salesforce acquired Slack, because in the near future, employees are not going to be bouncing around to different applications. They're not going to have to go to all these different applications. These applications are going to be served up in the platform where they're spending most of their time. And this is the approach of how to do it. So this is a summary of what that looks like. So right now, if any employee or say even an outside consumer has something that they need to get done, they have to traditionally schedule that work to be completed by a human being. Well, the transition of that is that this work is completely automated. Now, this approach is very nice. This entire thing can also be obviously built on other platforms, but a lot of companies that we consult with that use Microsoft and the Microsoft environment, they don't realize that a lot of this entire process can be built using existing Office 365 licenses that they already have access to. So a combination of cognitive services, Power Automate, Azure Bot Service, and that is that's something that currently exists that's easy to kind of seam together. What we're seeing is that once people start with one use case, like say for instance, they want to speed up the ordered the process where they're actually purchasing stuff, they'll add additional tasks to it. So for this particular example, this is the internal employee service desk or IT help desk. So using this approach where you're embedding these mini applications into Teams, you actually are able to automate 53% of the internal IT help desk. So very simple things like resetting password. Believe it or not, it makes up a huge percentage of employee requests. If an employee just opens up their Teams app and they quickly say, hey, I need to reset my HubSpot password, it gets them that information that they need very quickly. So the benefits of all of this adaptive automation approach is if you develop an application on Slack or Teams, it automatically connects to Active Directory, so you don't have to worry about employees having to forget their password or to re-log into somewhere. It's mobile ready, but even better than mobile ready, it's available across all operating systems on mobile phones, so you don't have to like design or be, careful about having to design for specific users or employees wherever they are. And the nice thing about Teams is, if you're using the alerts feature, then it's able to essentially figure out what device you're using the most, and then it sends that alert to that device. So it doesn't just blast all your devices at once. The approval workflows and of course the tabs. So when I showed you the bot, actually you can embed the other items into tabs into Teams, and you can also embed the bot into a tab itself. So as you know, Teams is organized in such a way that you have different projects and you can put tabs into it. So this is actually changing dramatically how companies are accessing knowledge and information and getting stuff done. And then lastly, I'll actually just cover this entire architecture of how this is built and then kind of walk you through it. So this might be a little bit technical, but I think it does help kind of give the perspective. So what we're looking at here is a complete automated way of getting work done as quickly as possible in the platform where employees are spending most of the time. So from a technology vision perspective, for the people who are strategists on the call, technology gets adapted by the methods that are most efficient. With one caveat, it has to be usable by human beings. So what we're seeing from this approach is actually the combination of both. This is the most efficient way to get anything done while it's already on the platform where they're spending the most amount of time. And it's designed specifically to work for human beings because they don't have to learn any sort of new interface. They don't have to go to some website and figure out what the navigational structure is set up as. They can simply just quickly ask a question. So we're using a combination of Azure bot services at the core, kind of act as a controller. To process the intent, we're using cognitive services like Luis. If you were to redesign this entire thing on AWS, you'd have Amazon Connect and Amazon Lex to do that. Active Directory kind of automatically authorizes the user so that they know what they can get done. Power Automate is what controls the flow of information and the actual runtime in terms of what APIs to send the data to and what order. So from a workflow perspective, what we've seen from a consulting perspective is a lot of companies have kind of stepped away from Power Automate for the longest time because initially it wasn't a very effective tool. It was kind of at the early stages, but over the last year and a half, this tool has dramatically increased and become actually our go-to tool that we recommend for customers because it's also automatically integrated into Teams and it's easy for companies to use, and it has all of these pre-built automations right out of the box. So we're seeing this trend where people are moving away from UiPath and going over to Power Automate because it's also a lot easier to start using Power Automate. You can do it for like $150 per flow, so you don't have a huge upfront cost. And then what we're doing is we're communicating directly with outside APIs and all along the lines, whatever your ITSM is, it creates an audit log the entire way. But the nice thing about it is that it creates the ticket, but it automatically closes the ticket for you as well. So it's not like it's there to create more work for you. It's there to actually create the ticket. What we're actually seeing is this kind of this trend or this prediction that whoever is going to take over this method in order to capture employee service is actually going to competitively kind of replace ITSM providers like ServiceNow. Because at this point, if everything's already automated by the time it gets to ServiceNow, they're acting essentially as a database. So as you know, they're competing for that same position. But this entire workflow is changing the entire behavior of work in the office. And it's essentially gone back down to the lines of this is the most efficient way from an energy standpoint of automating tasks.
And when you speak of energy, you're speaking of kind of mental energy and physical energy as well. And so I could replace like ServiceNow with Zendesk or Zoho or some other service provider.
I mean, every company has a separate ITSM, but what we're basically seeing is that companies don't really need to ServiceNow and stuff is good for workflow for managing the work of humans to schedule tasks. But if the entire work is already automated, then tools like ITSM just become a place where you're auditing. I apologize to the ServiceNow people who are on this call.
No worries. I'm just thinking in terms of some of the clients I've been dealing with, and so this brings up a couple of points. I see the cognitive services here. So how far away are we from being able to do things like sentiment analysis and potentially hands-free workflows where, today, I could see interacting with the chatbot, via text, but from an accessibility's perspective, or let's say take somebody that's maybe from a different industry like healthcare. We're providing health services and maybe we're on the go and aren't necessarily typing things. Is it possible in the future to be able to kind of talk with this kind of service bot?
Yes. So essentially, you can change the channel to which the person's interacting. What we found from doing these large deployments across the board at banks and for other companies is that voice, although it's very nice to have for home automation purposes, still hasn't quite taken over in terms of enterprise type of operations. So we're still seeing a trend to where people are preferring typing and texting. And then if you go towards voice, you're getting away from like the ability to pull up these mini cards to make it quick for people to access information. You're forcing them into like a very linear based conversation, although you can make them multi-turn and contextual based. So once companies start moving towards this more where they're actually automating in a conversational sense, then from more of like a novelty standpoint, not necessarily novelty, but from a very specific use case perspective, we'll start seeing voice being implemented. But at its core, text-based communication is still the leader, and that's just because people are so used to texting, especially in chatting, and this feels like you're just chatting with another person on your team to get something done.
Very cool.
So I think we're gonna open it up for questions too, so that we can kind of allow anybody to ask any sort of question. So I will leave it on this slide here to kind of open it up, because I think this tends to where people like to kind of ask the question. And lastly, let's see here. I'll go over one last thing just to kind of fill in some details. So our team here has done various projects across the board. So we've done everything from conversational AI in terms of inside autonomous vehicles. We've done projects with Lockheed Martin to put conversational AI inside fighter jets. So they have these support drones that follow the jets. And when somebody's under cognitive load, it's very difficult to give them another mechanism to control those. We've done large-scale deployments for banks, for Ford Motor Company on the assembly line when vehicles come off the line. They used to have to walk over to a computer terminal to put those defects in. Now using Polycom headsets, they can just talk into the microphone and say, hey, there's a scratch in the right front bumper by the headlight. For Epic and Unity, this is something that hasn't quite hit the market yet. What we're seeing, they're building obviously VR experiences, but VR building experiences. So imagine you're in VR and you're trying to build a 3D world. It's very difficult to do that with a traditional navigation structure, especially if you're dealing with a lot of 3D objects. So you could say something like, hey, can you put that rusty shipping container over by that dumpster fire? And it's able to locate that. And then we also done deployments, of course, in other languages, which is something that's somewhat difficult to accomplish. So yeah, that's it. I think I don't know how to actually include. So if you want to, you can raise your hand, ask a question. You can type in your question if you have one, or we can actually open up everybody to allow microphones too. So if you have any questions, but otherwise, if that's it, if you feel free to follow up, I'll give a more personalized presentation on any of these topics, including adaptive automation. It is a new term. It's one step beyond intelligent automation. And again, the key here is to be able to allow employees easier access to automations.
Right. And as Brian mentioned, we'll actually be sending out a follow-up email from this webinar to give you some of that information, as well as give you an invitation to schedule a consultation or a workshop. We can go in and go through this information and make it pertinent to your particular use case. From a digital transformation perspective, that's one of the things we kind of pride ourselves on, is being able to look at your business and understand your use cases and help you build a case for doing this yourselves internally or with potential partners of yours. So while we're waiting, I've got some things I've gotten from questions beforehand. So let's say we're already using Teams. Hero has a question. Is this different than Power Apps chatbots?
Yes. So in Power Apps chatbots, it's very limited in scope in terms of what it's capable of accomplishing. It's somewhat similar. The difference here is we build out these custom workflows to connect to various different APIs. And with Power Apps chatbots, you don't have as much control over the adaptive cards that you're bringing in. So things like Bot Composer from Microsoft, although they're very effective, once you start trying to accomplish things that are a little bit complex, it becomes hard. So from a conceptual standpoint, it's very much the same, but from an actual deployment standpoint, those out-of-the-box solutions still need some level of configuration. So like Power Apps chatbots, they don't handle like carrying context or handling messy questions and things like that. But you still get the same essential benefit from that similar workflow.
Okay, it might be useful to go back to the easy automation target slide, the one with the troubleshooting and how do I, that one. That's this one. I actually question these statistics. I think some of our clients might have some of these be actually higher than this. I know in my personal experience dealing with some help desk automation, that whole password reset, security questions, user ID forgot, etc., ended up being a lot more of the help desk line than those. I'd be curious if anyone else on the call or webinar sees something that they would say ours is more problematic than that or less problematic, etc. If not, so what do you think is the estimated cost savings or the ROI of this kind of AI automation?
So what we're seeing is when we apply it to the IT help desk, the easiest way to kind of assess it for your organization is to take the total number of tickets that you have and put a price to that. So it might be $6, might be $25. From a target perspective, you can automate about half of them. So that's one part of the value. The other part is the speed in which you're automating, so the gain in productivity. So as everybody here on the call knows that every time you fill out an IT ticket and you're waiting 3 days, it interrupts your productivity flow. So that additional increase in productivity by getting employees what they need instantly also helps. From the ordering experience, to kind of give you an example, so the companies that implement automated ordering or conversational commerce, so to speak, on Teams, what they're seeing is typically they have about one full-time person handling those orders, and that person's work is redirected. So usually on these projects, you get at least a 5-to-1. The nice thing about automation in this sense is everything is easily measured. So you know exactly how much value that you're providing and creating. You can compare it and you can keep track of it in your ITSM. From other perspectives, from an intranet perspective, one thing is that you're really simplifying work for your employees. So right now, as everybody here on the call knows, like it's very kind of almost confusing how many apps you have to access in order to get your job done. By reducing the number of jumps that an employee has to do, so from leaving Teams to going anywhere else, you're really easing that burden of having to think about unnecessary things. It's almost like you're wearing the same outfit every day, so that you can focus that same decision energy on actually getting work done. So from a return perspective, 5-to-1, but more importantly, like as companies become more and more automated and they bring on more bots, it's also just a complexity perspective. When companies become half bots and half humans, there is a problem, and a lot of companies aren't there yet. But what we're seeing, and the nice thing is, from a consultant point of view, we get the opportunity of actually addressing these people's problems from the front line. So we're actually in the front line solving these problems, and we're seeing this very firsthand. Companies like, I bring in UiPath and we create all these automations, but none of these employees are actually using them. It's because nobody actually wants to log into UiPath to kick off an attended bot. It's kind of complex. So what we're seeing is that reduce the complexity, but the ease of access. So this is a strategy to kind of a long-term approach to kind of address that ahead of time. So from a strategy standpoint, as you're making decisions for your organization to automate, you kind of want to take into account that you want to apply human-centered design to your automation, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are concerned about how bots are going to kind of perform. Sometimes bots are actually placed in such a situation where they're kind of driving human behavior and human work, which kind of creates a work environment that's not very fun. In this environment with adaptive automation, what we're doing is we're actually putting the human beings in a place where they have access and control of these automations. But the thing about automations is, as they become more advanced, you actually need to configure those automations before you actually run them. So they can't really kind of identify everything that needs to happen. So by placing them right within teams and being able to use adaptive cards to be able to manipulate those automations, you're able to kind of put that power in the employee's hand. And on top of it, like by deploying it on teams, you can give automations access to frontline workers or people who are working on the field or in the manufacturing floor. That's what we're seeing in that sense. So so imagine like you have a bunch of IoT sensors in a manufacturing environment, and something happens, being able to serve up that information or that alert to that user, but not just alerting the user, but being able to provide an adaptive card. So when something does happen, they're able to actually select the right automation to kick off the proper procedure to fix that problem. So from a perspective of where this industry is headed, nobody has really kind of encapsulated the term on this subject yet, and this is really what we're kind of trying to from a vision perspective is and if anybody of course disagrees that they don't think this is a future problem, that is, of course, I would love to hear any questions on that. But we're seeing this kind of trend, and when we finally put a name to it, we started kind of going around from a consulting perspective and describing to people like this approach to automation. You can see that by naming it, it's almost like you're condensing lots of thought into one sentence, and that really helps kind of capture the essence of what this is trying to accomplish, and it fills that gap. So we've been in calls with, for instance, with Walgreens, and they're basically having that same problem where they're building a lot of intranets, but none of their employees are wanting to access them, especially now that they're mobile. So they're bringing and shifting all those applications into Teams to be able to easily have employees access them. One of the tools that we're using in here that I haven't actually shown that is new. So a lot of companies would build stuff on SharePoint previously because SharePoint List was something that was free because it was part of Office 365. But a new tool that's out from Microsoft is called the Dataverse, which used to be called Microsoft Common Data Services. But with the Dataverse, it's included into Power Apps, and you can actually use that to power the back end of these automation routines. So for this instance of that shopping experience that I showed you, the entire cart and everything that user is doing from a conversational perspective, we're storing it in the Dataverse, and that's not adding additional licensing costs. So from our perspective, what we try to do when we consult with customers, we show them these like really helpful hints and tips to kind of hack your way through, not in a bad way, but like in the way that like, hey, these things are already accessible to you. We just use them in a very particular way and put some human-centered design on top of it, and you really have a very effective way to automate any task within an organization. So if you can think of any internet application, taking it out of email is obviously never going to go away, especially when you're communicating with people outside of your organization. But when it comes to internal communication between people, and when it comes to internal communication between humans and bots, it's definitely more effective to use a chat-based application and program, whether that is Microsoft Teams or Slack. Now that's it is of course taking a while. Sometimes when you have a vision for technology, what you're kind of waiting for is for human behavior to catch up. And that's what we're seeing is really the delay that you're seeing for why this hasn't actually taken off is that it does take some, time for change management to take effect. But after that is there, oftentimes the only way that you can really assess whether a technical vision is going to happen is to really understand what is the energy output of a task. And if you're finding that it's the least amount of energy output to get something done in the fastest amount of time and it's effective for human beings to use it, then it's going to happen. And that is just a matter of how long is it going to take for everybody else to kind of catch on and change their behavior and use things in this way. Luckily, we have obviously accelerated the human behavior change in terms of people using Teams to chat with other people. And also we're seeing a trend of obviously in starting with Gen Zs, of course, to prefer chat-based communication to get stuff done. So this is something that is quite right on our doorstep. So we're probably not going to have to wait as long as other technical changes have to happen. I mean, obviously this is happening right now, but from a perspective where a lot of people are recognizing it and people are actually asking specifically for that, we're still waiting on that. From a consultant point of view, obviously when we go into companies, we're showing them this particular solution and how it solves problems, and that obviously helps. But from an education point of view, it does take a while to kind of get new concepts pushed out there so that people understand it. Right now, the entire market is kind of stuck on intelligent automation, which is the combining RPA plus AI. And then this is what we are from a perspective projecting in terms of the next step.
Yeah, so that's fascinating. So I can see there's a lot of value that's potentially can be unlocked using this data-driven approach. Would you, in your experience, would you have any suggestions or ideas or some thoughts around, you know, what are some of the candidate processes for automation that you would want to go and look at?
Yeah, the best approach to kind of build a business case for this is to take the last 12 months of your help desk data and to analyze what is your highest volume and which ones are taking the longest time to actually resolve. On average, it's going to be about 3 days. Let's see. And let's go to this slide 20. How do I, there we go. Let's slip through it here. This is the fastest way to get to it. Oops, there you go. Is that the slide that you want, Frank? Or no, that doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, oh, sorry. What was the question again, Frank? I apologize.
It was about the candidate processes for automation. You had a screen there that showed three different.
Let's see, this is this way. Okay. So, well, yes. So if you're kind of getting started, this process helps you identify and prioritize and create a product roadmap for automation. So here, as you're seeing, we get first, this is the very simplest, easiest way to kind of create an automation roadmap if you don't have one. Identifying and starting with the highest volume tasks, like the ones that employees are spending the most manual time on. So it might be, hey, employees are spending so much time manually entering in purchase order data into an ERP. And then taking those tasks and kind of focusing on the ones that are easiest and the rules-based ones, so that those are obviously the easiest ones to automate. There's some that take some sort of inference-based decision-making, which you can apply AI to, but if you're just getting started in automation, you know, you always want to start obviously with the easiest ones, because a lot of companies don't realize that there's about $10 million of, if you're a large organization with over 2,000 employees, there's at least $10 million of easy automation tasks, like right off the bat, that you can get a hold of. And of course, and then analyzing the speed and impact. So how quickly can you actually build it and what's the overall impact to that? What we do too is this is an approach that we assess. So this is taking the IT help desk tickets and then figuring out how long they're taking, building out an assessment in terms of, you know, which ones we can automate, and then coming up with an overall target for that. So, yep.
So you've talked about help desk and procurement ordering, things like that. Could I also use this from an HR perspective for like on or offboarding personnel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good question. So onboarding is a very important task. You know, when a new employee starts, if they're sitting there waiting, not only do they feel kind of like they're not that important, but also it's kind of getting in the way of their actual work. So one of the things that we're building within Teams is actually being able to do employee training and compliance right within the bot. So if you have new training that has to happen, being able to serve up that training in shorter videos so that you can constantly keep your staff up to date. Obviously, nobody likes HR kind of hounding them to kind of complete their compliance training. Also, from an onboarding perspective, like, filling out all those documents, getting everything done, like keeping track of all that stuff on email is very difficult. I think we've all started new jobs and we're like, I know I was supposed to fill out this form, it was somewhere. Doing onboarding on Teams-based automation is very effective because essentially it walks you through everything that needs to happen. And if you forget to do something, it'll quickly remind you of how to do it. So everything from procuring new hardware to filling out any sort of forms that you need access to, or joining new Teams groups, things like that. And then offboarding, of course, that's more of an automation that from a Power Automate perspective, but it also is very important from a security perspective, making sure that you're protecting resources and doing it very quickly. So sometimes offboarding might take a few days in order to figure out all the accounts that somebody has access to. But especially if you're in the Microsoft environment with Active Directory, being able to do that is fairly fast.
Cool. Well, let's see. I want to get a chance to see if there's any other questions from the audience.
All right. If not, usually the one-on-one demonstrations are very effective, and I can kind of focus more on what you guys are interested on. Thanks for coming to the webinar, of course. This is it's kind of sometimes difficult to kind of give a very broad presentation to a group of people that are a mix of business and technical folks. So try to do my best to cover the topics, but anybody who's interested in automation, this is what we're seeing on that. And then if you have particular use cases and stuff that you want to kind of talk over, obviously you can reach out to us, and then feel free to give you more information. So my goal is to make sure that I'm delivering value, especially in every meeting that we have. So whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, I'll make sure to get you guys what you need. And then from a project perspective, Softura, we have a wide range of different types of resources, but as you're looking into automation or conversational AI, we have a very specific specialty on that. And then on adaptive automation, so a lot of companies there's not many companies out there that actually are knowing how to kind of push this kind of approach of automating onto teams. In fact, I don't know if you can find too many of them. So like we have this particular passion of doing this. And if you have that problem with automating, just feel free to kind of reach out, and then we'll kind of do that. And then we can even start with a POC, or I can send you the link to this bot so that you can test it out and have other people at your office test it out. So we try to keep it pretty efficient, of course, because we are automation at the core of who we are as people.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our webinar. Thank you very much, and look forward to hearing from you and getting some follow-ups where we can engage with you in the future. Thank you very much. Have a great day.